All right, I hope you're enjoying the class so far. Now it's time to go deeper into the PMBOK Guide dregs. That's what I call it, the PMBOK Guide dregs. That's right. We are currently on Develop Project, the very first process in the PMBOK Guide. Now, if you look behind me, you see stuff that you might recognize, maybe from the world, maybe from what you've heard about the PMBOK Guide. Well, we got to go deeper into this stuff. So why don't you follow me to chapter 4 to develop project charter. Come on, follow along, open up the book, whatever's left of it, that is. Now let's go to 4.1. I want to show you a few things in 4.1, okay? Now, before you get to 4.1, follow me to page 71, because I want to talk about the two perspectives to the PMBOK Guide. There are two perspectives to the PMBOK Guide processes. Every one of the 49 processes has two perspectives to it. The first perspective is pretty much what you see behind me, and that is from page 71 and section 4.1 on page 71. You see it's broken out in section 4.1 through 4.7, but 4.1, you see the following things behind me, don't you? Take a look at them. Business case, you see that? Agreements, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. You see that? That is in the very first box. Then the tools and techniques, you can see behind me, expert judgment, data gathering, interpersonal and team skills, and meetings. You see that right here, all this stuff right here. That is a high-level view of this process. Now, last but not least, you can take a look at that side. You'll see the project charter and the assumption log. You see that stuff? That is the high-level view. Now, for every process, there are two views, high-level view, low-level view. In the introduction to each process, I'm just going to be telling you casually what each of these things is at a high level. But then we got to go into the low-level stuff, all right? So that's how we're going to roll with this. Are you ready? So take a look at the inputs, those inputs over there. Okay. Business documents, this is specifically the business case that makes a case for the project, that tells you why the project has been authorized. Next one here, agreements. This is contracts, letters of intent, memorandums of understanding, and things such as that. Any form of agreement, even verbal agreements. Next, you've got enterprise environmental factors, which refers to organizational culture, structure, governance, infrastructure, IT software, and things such as that, regulations and things that affect the project. The next one here is organizational process, and that is pretty much processes and procedures for doing things, the corporate knowledge base, templates, tools, and what have you, okay? Now let's go into these tool techniques. At a high level there, expert judgment. Expert judgment is surrounding developing charters for projects or subject from. Next one is data gathering, and this refers to gathering data that's going to be used in the charter. Next one, interpersonal and team skills. As you can see, you need to have these great interpersonal skills to get the team to align, agree, and synergize. And when I say team, bear in mind that even though this is developed project charter, there is some sort of skeletal team available. Even if it's just the project manager and the project sponsor, they're there. They're the base on which other team members are going to be laid upon. And then meetings. I mean, everyone knows what meetings are, right? So does that make sense? Very straightforward. This is the high level. Remember that. And on this side, you see the project charter itself. And the project charter is authorization for the project. Why are you doing the project? Why are you authorizing the project? Who is the project manager, project sponsor? What success criteria for the project, such as that. That's over here, okay? And then the next one here is the assumption log. And the assumption log is assumption constraints. Boom, that was the high level. Now, for every process, there is a high but there. All right, so there's a lower level of detail that I'm going to show you. And the lower level of detail can be found in the PMBOK guide as well. We just got to go a layer under. And if you open up your book, now you can open up your book to 4.1. And if you look at 4.1 on page 75. So page 75, and be looking at figure 4-2. Do you see that? Okay. You ready for the lower level? Let's do it. Bing! Uh-oh. It looks like there are more bullet points. This is where we really need to focus. Okay? Now, after this, I am going to be giving you a quiz. So pay close attention, okay? So the inputs, you can see they are now broken out to show you what business documents are. Now, I'm not sure which version of the PMBOK guide you have, but just bear in mind that in some versions of the PMBOK guide, some of these sub-bullets may or may not be there. For example, in my copy, I have the benefits management plan as a second bullet, but some of you will not. But the reason why I have left this there is because the benefits management plan is a key part of project management today. It's a plan that talks about the benefits that you'll get from the project. And it tells you when the benefits of the project will be realized. And it also tells you who is responsible for tracking the benefits. And it also tells you how those benefits will be tracked, managed, and realized. See? So it is important for you to know this because I suspect the PMI could ask you questions about this. Now you've taken a look at business documents and you can see that in this case I referenced that first. Now the second one here is agreements. So agreements is just that. There's no other minutia to EEFs or OPAs. Now taking a look at the tools here, just to move so that you can see them really well. Okay, right here. Okay. These tools and techniques, the expert judgment is pretty much the same. Data gathering, now you can see the specific data gathering I'm talking about. Brainstorming, focus groups, and interviews. Do you see that? Those are three ways you can gather data. Everyone knows brainstorming. Focus groups brings key stakeholders together, not everyone, but some key stakeholders, so that they can focus on getting the project charter developed, for example. And interviews. You interview people to better understand their perspectives or any information that you need to glean from them about the project. Does this make sense? Good. Interpersonal and team skills. Now, as you begin to go deeper, you see what exactly has been spoken about. Conflict management, the ability to solve conflict. Because trust me, if you're a project manager, you know that conflict does exist. It will rear its head. What are you going to do when it does? You got to use conflict management. And that's why we got conflict management there. Next, we have facilitation, the ability to facilitate the team, get them on the same page and move them along. And when we talk about the team, we're talking about the existing stakeholders working on the charter. Now, if you haven't been on big projects, let me let you into this secret. On big projects, the number of initial stakeholders could be overwhelming. You could have like 50, 30, 40, 20 already existing stakeholders even before the project is authorized. So when we look at things like this, you got to remember this in economies of scale. Maybe on some projects you're working on, there may not be that much of a stakeholder base, but on many other projects, there is. All right, meetings. So what do we mean by meetings? The meeting of the minds, the stakeholders, they need to meet. Now let's talk about the last piece over here. We can see the project charter, which I talked about, authorization for the project, so on and so forth, and then the assumption log. Now, what I'm going to do is allow you ask any questions that you may have about the minutia we've been looking at. You see, like this stuff over here, the project charter, the assumption log, I want you to ask questions if you need more information about them, okay? Now, I'm going to give you some time to ask questions now. So if you've got any questions, you need to put them in the chat so that I can answer them for you. And if there are existing questions in the chat, I'll answer them, okay? So over to you. Questions about any of this stuff I've shared, because the only bits we haven't really gone deep into are page 81, where you've got everything about the project charter, and the assumption log. Let's read a few things very quick. What is in the project charter? The project purpose, measurable project objectives, and related success criteria, high-level requirements, high-level project description, boundaries, key goals, overall project risk, summary milestone schedule, pre-approved financial resources, key stakeholder list, project approval requirements, project exit criteria, you, the assigned project manager, name and authority of the sponsor or the persons authorizing the project charter. So whenever you come across these major outputs, you got to slow down, got to read the detail. Slow down, read the detail. Okay? Now, we have assumption log. High-level strategic and operational assumptions and constraints are normally identified in the business case before the project is initiated. So what are they telling you? These constraints and assumptions at a high level already exist in the business case. But as the project has been authorized, what does it say? Will flow into the project charter. Lower level activity and task assumptions are generated throughout the project, such as defining technical specs, estimates, schedule, risks, so on and so forth. The assumption log is used to record all assumptions and constraints throughout the project life cycle. So that's how we're going to roll, my friends. We're going to take a look at the high level, the low level, high level, low level, and then it will be question time. So what I want you to do right now, before I ask you the questions, is to study that table on page 75. Can you do that right now? And if you've got questions, put them in. Let's address the questions, and then we'll move on, okay? But I hope this is helping you unravel the mystery of the PMBOK guide. So put in your questions, and I'll begin to answer them one by one. Let's do it. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. That was rather straightforward. Why don't we move on to our next area, if you're ready? Okay. Let's move on to develop project management plan. Let's do it. So, develop project management plan. As usual, you know I'm taking you to two places, high level and low level. High level on page 71. So follow me to page 71. Okay. So taking a look at this, you can see things that you're familiar with. The project charter we've talked about, you know what that is. Outputs from other processes, what does that mean? This refers to all of the different ingredients that make up your project management plan. Do you see that our project management plan is an output here? Well, the project management plan is made up of several subsidiary plans, tiny little plans. Those tiny little plans are going to come into this process as outputs from other processes. So whenever you see outputs from other processes, it's referring to the tiny little plans and baselines that make up this, the project management plan. Okay, enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets, we've talked about these. Remember the mnemonic, only great individuals inspire resources every day. And remember, my senator legalized cranberry and granola for patients, probably hungry patients. But you remember that. This is going to help you get through this EEF and OPA repetition. Now, if you were not paying close attention to my mnemonic for EEF and OPAs, let me take you to a page where we can address it once and for all, and we will never have to do this ever again. I'm joking, you might. All right, so page 38, only great individuals inspire resources every day. Those are your internal EEFs, structure and governance, geographic distribution of facilities and resources, infrastructure, information technology software, resource availability, and employee capability. That's on page 38. Page 39 has got the external EEFs, marketplace conditions, social and cultural influences, legal restrictions, commercial databases, academic research, government or industry standards, financial considerations, and physical environmental elements. Those are EEFs external to the organization. You see that? You got to get those mnemonics down, okay? Then organizational process assets, there are two big buckets, processes and procedures, and it says on page 39, organizational knowledge bases. So when you turn the page over, you see they've broken it down into processes, policies, and procedures. And the second bucket is called organizational knowledge repositories. That's on page 41. So I took all this pain to tell you, these guys right here, okay, read them deep and detailed once so you don't have to go back again and again and again and again, okay? You got to get it down. Processes and procedures, especially this one, processes and procedures, and organizational knowledge repositories, okay? So I hope this is helping you. All right, let's talk about the tools and techniques. So talking about the tools and techniques here, expert judgment, expertise about the project, expertise about putting the project management plan together, data gathering data as usual, interpersonal and team skills, being able to harmonize and synergize the team, and being able to coordinate things, and then meetings. And last but not least, the project management plan. So let's get into the weeds. Are you ready? Let's go. we are going to section 4.2. So open up that guide of yours to page 82. All right, come on now. Page 82, what does it say? It says, develop project management plan is the process of defining, preparing, and coordinating all plan components and consolidating them. Wait a minute. All plan components is referring to what? This. When we say all plan components, we mean this. Are you following what I'm saying? So outputs from other processes is really all these plan components. And it says consolidating them into an integrated project management plan. The key benefit of this process is the production of a comprehensive document that defines the basis of all project work and how the work will be performed. Did you see that? So that's really what we're trying to do here. Good. Now, taking a look at our next figure, because we're going deep and detailed now into the second table. To be precise, I'm talking about table for a figure, I beg your pardon, figure 4-4. There's a difference between the table and the figure. So, bing, here we go. Project management plan. So let's see if there's any difference in the level of detail. Taking a look at the inputs, it's pretty much the same. The project charter, outputs from other processes, which is your subsidiary plans and baselines, EEFs and OPAs. That's pretty straightforward. But now going into the tools and techniques, we see something similar to what was in Develop Project Charter. So we've got expert judgment, we understand that. Data gathering, right? Data gathering, brainstorming. The one that we didn't have before, I believe, was checklists. So if you just read a little bit in this section, you see what they mean by checklist. It's really a checklist of what should be in the project management plan. See, we got to make these things as simple as possible. You see this on page 85. It says, many organizations have standardized checklists available based in their own experience or use checklists from the industry. So checklists, we can use checklists to check off, have we got what needs to go into the plan or not? Focus groups, key stakeholders are going to be gathered together. You're going to talk to them. You're going to get information from them. You're going to put heads together. In essence, you're going to work on the plan. This is a big effort. So you're going to have those focus groups, interviews will extract the information that you need from stakeholders. And now we've got interpersonal and team skills again, very similar to what we saw before. Conflict management. If there is conflict, the project manager should use his or her great interpersonal skills in the area of conflict management to resolve conflict. Facilitation, what are we doing here? Facilitating the meeting of the minds, making sure there's effective participation, making sure everyone is in mutual understanding and moving together as a team. Meeting management, if your meetings aren't managed, goodness help you. You do need meeting management so that you hold your meetings to time and you maximize the availability of team members, making sure your meetings are well run, and of course, meetings themselves. And last but not least, we have the project management plan. Now, for this piece, my friends, we need to go to page 89. I want to show you the details and intricacies here. So, project management plan, what do you see? Scope management plan, requirements management plan, many, many plans listed on page 89. You see that? Now, this requires many, many minutes of explanation. For that, you're going to have to listen to the audio on the project management plan. It's a standalone separate audio. So I want you to chat into me right now if you have not received that piece of curricula. It's an audio on nothing but the project management plan. If you haven't got that, chat down below right now. Okay? Secondly, you can see on that page project documents. As you might have guessed, there is another audio on nothing but project documents. You should have received that. And if you haven't, no big deal, we'll send it to you. But chat in below so that we can take action accordingly. Okay? Chat in below. Confirm that you did get it. So what do I want you to do? Listen to these audios round the clock to really master these intricacies and the logic behind the groupings. It's important. I want you to binge on audio. From now on, you don't have any Jimmy Fallon, any Jimmy Kimmel, any of those shows. This is your late night show. This is your late night entertainment. And all of those videos on the learning management system, you better believe it. That is your entertainment. All right. So do me a favor. You got any questions? I want you to chat in your questions about this process, because that's it for Develop Project Management Plan. All good? Chat into me. All right. Are you feeling more confident? I hope you are. Well, let's move on to our third process of integration. You ready to go? Let's do it. This one is called Direct and Manage Project Work. Direct and Manage Project Work, on page 75, you've got the high level. On page 90, you've got the minutia. Let's talk about the high level first. So at a high level, this process consists of those inputs, the project management plan we've talked about, project documents, which are on page 89. We just need to go into a little bit more detail later on. But a project document is a document that you use for the upkeep of the project. It's not a plan. It's a document that you use to keep things aligned and straight by way of data that could change. For example, a project schedule is a project document. You update the schedule, you modify the schedule, you change it. However, there is a schedule baseline that does not change. The schedule baseline is the original schedule etched in stone and frozen that management is going to look at to hold you accountable. But the project schedule is for everyday management of the project. And you can change that. So when you see project documents, bear in mind these are things that change, a lot of times without permission. Sometimes management may request permission to change certain project documents. Other times they may not. But generally speaking, project documents in the world of this PMI book change without permission, typically. Okay. Now, there are some documents in some unique circumstances, management may say, that's a unique controlled document. In those instances, you can't just change those, okay? So we've got our project management plan coming in here, project documents. Now we have approved change request. Keep your eye on that one. Keep your eye on that one. That one is a bad boy. That one does not appear in many processes. So when you see it, you got to pay close attention. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But an approved change request is a request for changes that has been approved by the change control board or the approving authority on the project. All right, EEFs and OPAs. What did I say in the last process? We look at them once, never to worry about them again. Only great individuals inspire resources every day. My senator legalized cranberry and granola for patients. I'm trying to censor out the non-PG terms. And then processes and procedures and the organizational knowledge repository. You gotta know this stuff like this, okay? Before we get done with this session, I want you to know it cold. All right, good. Now, as usual, expert judgment, we know. Now, there's a new one here, which we haven't talked about previously, the PMIS, Project Management Information System. This is any system that is used to store and manage project information. It's as simple as that. Microsoft Project, Primavera, maybe even your Smart Sheets, Clearview, PlanView, any of those repositories. SharePoint is an example. So let's read real quick, PMIS. Follow along. Remember, questions at the end. Follow along. Okay, page 95, it says, the PMIS provides access to information technology software tools such as scheduling software tools, work authorization systems, configuration management systems, information collection and distribution systems, as well as interfaces to other online automated systems, such as corporate knowledge base repositories. Automated gathering and reporting on key performance indicators can be part of this system. So just think any system used to manage project information, keep it straight. That's exactly what they're talking about here, okay? And of course, what would we do without meetings? Meetings, the meeting of minds. What are we meeting about? Let's read. It says, meetings are used, page 95, meetings are used, 95 in this book, okay? Meetings are used to discuss and address pertinent topics of the project when directing and managing project work. Attendees may include the project manager, the project team, let's just say all stakeholders as necessary. Types of meetings include, but are not limited to, kickoff meeting, technical, sprint or iteration planning, Scrum, daily stand-ups, steering group, problem solving, so on and so forth. Are you ready to go into the detail? I hope you are. I hope you're paying attention, because I can see if you ain't. You better be paying attention. I'm looking at you. I got my eye on you, my friend. Better be taking those notes down, because I'm going to be asking you questions about this process in a few minutes. All right. So let's go into the details of direct and manage project work. So as you can see on the screen, project management plan is listed, any component, project documents, and there's a laundry list of project documents. Now, what I would like you to do is get familiar and comfortable with project documents, okay? So as you can see here, change log, a log of changes, lessons learned register, a register of stakeholders, lessons learned, that is. Lessons learned register is a register of the stakeholders' lessons learned. So when I say stakeholders, bear in mind, we're not just talking about the team. Anyone involved in the project could have lessons learned. and those get put into the lessons learned register, okay? Now, I was very bad-mannered. I failed to tell you what page this table is on, so forgive me. We're going to start again, page 90, okay? And you want to be looking at figure 4-6 with me. So, project management plan, any component, project documents, and all of those there, and bear in mind, the PMI, sometimes they may change this out as a result of comment. And that would be found in the PMBOK guide errata, which lies on the PMI's website. But let's not go into that right now. If you got a question about the errata, you can type it in. We'll talk about it at the end of this. But change log, lessons learned register, milestone list, project communications, any communications sent, exchanged on the project schedule. What is that? Like I said, it is a living, breathing schedule, not the baseline. Remember that. Requirements traceability matrix, it's a table of requirements for your deliverable, and it maps each requirement to who asked for the requirement. It's as simple as that. You'll see an example of this when we get to scope. So for now, just imagine a table that maps requirements to their origin. Risk register is a register of risks, those uncertainties that can impact the project positively or negatively. Risk report is a report highlighting the latest and greatest, biggest of the biggest risks that can impact the project, the most important ones for a particular time period. Your risk report could change over time period, but we want to highlight those risks that should be on the radar. Management may be able to help you out with that. So when we talk about direct and manage project work as a process, we're really talking about using whatever we need to in the project document section to effectively direct and manage the project. Does that make sense? That's why you've got all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff. Someone says, Phil, do I need to cram that all of these are used here? No, by osmosis, it will make sense why they are here. Moreover, as long as you know what these are, that's the first step to get into mastery. Okay? Next one here says approved change requests. So remember, I told you it's a bad boy. Be on the lookout for that. What exactly is an ACR? Let's read. Approved change request. It's a change request that has been approved by the approving authority, page 93. It says approved change requests are an output of the perform integrated change control process and include those requests reviewed and approved for implementation by the project manager or by the Change Control Board, CCB, when applicable. See, it says the approved change request may be a corrective action, a preventive action, or a defect repair. Approved change requests are scheduled and implemented by the project team and can impact any area of the project or project management plan. The approved change request can also modify the formally controlled project management plan components or project documents. Remember what I told you? Project management plan, project documents, they're different, but in some instances, there's some project documents that need authorization. Now, this varies. There's no hard and fast rule. But when it comes to project management plan, that definitely does need approval. You can't just change that as a project manager as you will or see fit. All right. So that's that. As far as the tools, we pretty much covered these. Nothing changes in these. Expert judgment, PMIS systems for directing and managing the project work, and meetings. You need meetings, kickoff meetings, status meetings, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, let's go to the outputs. So you see a number of outputs there. You see deliverables, This is by far one of the most important aspects of your exam, the concept of deliverables. What's the deliverable? Product, service, or result. Now, what do we need to know about these deliverables? It says on page 95, deliverables, it is any unique and verifiable product, result, or capability to perform a service. Think about that for a second. Deliverables, any unique, verifiable product, result, or capability to perform a service. So that means when you have been enabled to perform a service, that could be a project. It could be. The project could be to enable the organization perform a service. Think about that. See that? It says that is required to be produced to complete a process, phase, or project. Deliverables are typically the outcomes of the project and can include components of the project management plan. It then says change control should be applied once the first version of a deliverable has been completed. The control of the multiple versions or additions of a deliverable, that is documents, software, building blocks, is supported by configuration management tools and procedures. So that's a big one. Understanding what deliverables are. That's the beginning. Okay, next thing you have here is work performance data, WPD. On page 95, it says work performance data are the raw observations and measurements identified during activities. Let's digest that for a second. Work performance data are the raw observations. Remember, we talked about this in a previous chapter. Work performance data is the raw observations. Work performance data is the raw observations. Great. You got to get this down. The raw observations, okay? Those raw observations, it says, often viewed as the lowest level of detail, we're on page 95, the lowest level of detail from which information is derived by other processes. Data is gathered through work execution and passed to the controlling processes for further analysis. So the logic is this: as we're working on the project, as we're doing things, we're observing these little things, raw observations, and then ultimately these raw observations are going to be sent to the monitoring and controlling process group processes, not all of them, but those from scope all the way down to stakeholder. We're going to analyze WPD there, and we're going to get what? Work performance information. Don't tell me you've forgotten. Have you? We have to open it up again so you guys can get a handle, firm handle on this. So let's take a look. I don't want you guys to forget this stuff. WPD, WPI, WPR. Okay, let's conclude this, and then I might have to give you a brain refresh. All right, so that makes sense. WPD, raw observations. Okay, next thing here is your issue log. As you can see, the issue log number 3, it's a log of issues on the project. And I did get so excited, I pretty much whizzed past the outputs on the previous slide. But that's okay, we're covering them here in detail, okay? So the issue log is a log of issues, misalignments, misunderstandings, anything that has to be resolved. Let's read. This is on page 96. It says, throughout the life cycle of a project, the project manager will normally face problems, gaps, inconsistencies, or conflicts that occur unexpectedly and that require some action. Did you see that? problems, gaps, inconsistencies, conflicts. Problems, gaps, inconsistencies, or conflicts that occur unexpectedly and that require some action, so they do not impact the project performance. The issue log is a project document where all issues are recorded and tracked. Data on issues may include, then it says issue type, who raised the issue, description, priority, who is assigned to the issue, target resolution date, status, and final solution. The issue log will help the project manager effectively track and manage issues, ensuring that they are investigated and resolved. The issue log is created for the first time as an output of this process, although issues may happen at any time during the project. The issue log is updated as a result of the monitoring and controlling activities throughout the project's lifecycle. As you are monitoring and controlling the project, you're getting a better understanding of issues. This is on page 96. Okay? Next thing you see here is change requests. And we've talked about this before, could be any type of request. And as you see on page 96, there's a mnemonic, CAPADRU. I call it CAPADRU. 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 Corrective action, CA. Preventive action, PA. DR, defect repair, and the U is for updates. So you got to remember that any changes, change requests, they're either going to be CA, PA, DR, or U. All right? Good. Now, welcome to the world of what we call project documents updates and OPA updates. We're going to be seeing these quite a bit. Oh, and of course, project management plan updates. So as you go through the project, once you are out of the gate of planning, as you're executing the work, you are going to get updates, project management plan updates. Your change request could be to update that, or you got project documents updates, or you've also got OPA updates, organizational process assets updates. So let's take a close look at what this says. Once we do it here, we will not continue doing it ad nauseum. We'll just make mention of it. Oh, those are those updates, and we'll move on. So take a close look. Page 97, the top, it says, any change to the project management plan goes through the organization's change control process via a change request. Any component of the project management plan may require a change request as a result of this process. See that? And then project documents updates. You can see it says project documents that may be updated as a result of carrying out this process. Watch these classic words. Include, but are not limited to. You are going to see this all throughout the PMBOK guide. Could include, but are not limited to. What are they trying to tell you? Don't hold your breath on these, because they may or may not, or additional ones may be included as an update. So you've got things here that could be updated, but I honestly wouldn't lose sleep over that. For your exam, you just need to make sure you know these definitions, okay? And to that effect, when you see gold zone, anytime it's relevant, whenever you see the gold, it means I might have a thing or two to say about the exam. So if you got special questions about, hey, Phil, what is the gold zone for this process? Ask me, okay? So for develop project charter, it was the project charter and the assumption log. That to me was gold zone items. In fact, most of the unique outputs and inputs, they're gold zone items. All right, last but not least, organizational process assets. It says any OPAs can be updated as a result of this process. That's it, my friends, for this process. Direct and manage project work. So how are you feeling? Is it making sense to you? Or do you have questions? Are you stuck? Are you happy? Chat into me. Chat into me, chat into me, chat into me. Let me make sure you're all right. Go on. Chat in before we move on. Oh, I have a message. Ha 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 ha. Indeed, I have a message for you. MPK. What is MPK? If you didn't know, you will today. It stands for Manage Project Knowledge. Manage Project Knowledge is the next one we are going to, my friends. So why don't we shift our gears here and get a move on, and let's get into Manage Project Knowledge. Manage Project Knowledge is the fourth process of integration management. That's exactly what we're going to look at, my friends. So why don't we do that? Ding! Manage project knowledge. Manage project knowledge at a very high level. The mission is to manage the flow of knowledge within the project. You're trying to create new knowledge for use in the entire firm and on the project, but you're also trying to get the team to use any existing knowledge, because knowledge reuse is important. Why is knowledge reuse important? It's important because if you don't use what you've already created, you're wasting the organization's resources. If you don't harness lessons learned and use lessons learned, you're only wasting resources. So I want to encourage you in your individual organizations, if lessons learned are being done poorly, this is the process that you need to call your management's attention to. So let's take a look. Over here, we have the project management plan. As always, it's guiding us on the process. Here we have project documents, and you find out that this is a cannibal process. It eats what it gave you. It eats what is coming out. What do I mean? Well, look at what is coming out. Right here, it says lessons learned register. But when we look under the hood, when we look below the surface, we find this same lessons learned register as one of the project documents coming back in to this process. I call it a cannibal process, just so you'd remember it. Just remember that cannibal process. Okay, next we have deliverables. We've talked about deliverables, but you know, deliverables are in all shapes and sizes and forms, and you can actually glean knowledge from certain deliverables. So any deliverable where you can glean knowledge that can be used on the project, you want to have this as an input. That's why we have it right here, okay? EEFs and OPAs, they need no introduction. We've talked about these before. Okay, changing gears here. Expert judgment. You know what this is: expertise, knowledge, and awareness about the project. Expert judgment is key, especially when you're sharing these lessons learned, because you're learning from the experts. You want to harness that knowledge, trap the expert knowledge from your stakeholders, and put it to great use. Knowledge management is connecting knowledge with people who need the knowledge. In other words, knowledge exists in the minds of certain stakeholders. We need to get those stakeholders to connect with people that need that knowledge. We call that knowledge management. Then we have information management. Information management is different. So when you capture information and document it, you can put it into a library or a repository or some other location online somewhere, library services and so on. Well, if people need the information, what should you do? Connect them to the information they need. So harnessing the information and connecting people to it is really what we mean by information management. There's a difference. Knowledge management, people have the knowledge, connect people to people. Forums, communities of practice, that's different. This one is more about the library services or repositories where people can be connected to the information that they need. Last but not least, we have interpersonal and team skills. Think about it. As lessons learned are being shared, you need to have great interpersonal skills as a PM. Connect people to people, people to information. There's bound to be some interpersonal and team skills at play. All right, let's take a look at the outputs. The lessons learned register is a register of lessons learned, things that you're cataloging because you did well and things you're cataloging because you did woefully. Lessons to be learned from those woeful performances. We also have the project management plan updates and OPA updates. We talked about this in the previous process, so there's really no need to dwell on this. Now, of course, we're still on page 75. If you were wondering, where are we? We are on page 75, my friends. 75. And on page 75, no, I'm sorry, I lied. We're on page 75. What was I saying? We're on page 71. I'm sorry. Page 71 is where you have the managed project knowledge, high-level stuff, the stuff that's behind me here. It's on page 71. Now let's go to the deeper pieces of 4.4. This is on page 98. 98. All right. So remember to hold your fire, your questions, to the end. And at the end of it all, we will address those special questions you have about MPK. But for now, bing, let's go to the detailed story here. Okay, so what is the detailed story in managed project knowledge? Let's read on page 98. It says, managed project knowledge is the process of using existing knowledge and creating new knowledge to achieve the project's objectives and contribute to organizational learning. That's really what you're trying to do, okay? All right, now, looking at the inputs, you can see that it's all components of the project management plan being talked about here. Project documents, the lessons learned register, as I told you on the previous slide, that is the same as the output. It eats what it gave you. It does. Well, let's take a look at what they have here under project documents. Follow me to page 101. It says, lessons learned register provides information on effective practices in knowledge management. So coming into this process, you want to already know what works, what doesn't work, so that as you do this in an iterative fashion, you are learning lessons right then and there from the project, and you are not repeating those mistakes, but you are repeating those home runs, those wins. You want to repeat them. Does that make sense? All right. So next thing here under project documents is project team assignments. Now, we're not going to go through every single thing with so much detail. I would like you to read some of it yourself, but follow me on page 101. It says, project team assignments provide information on the type of competencies and experience available. So if you look at your project team assignments, you know, oh, we got someone who's great at testing, someone who's great at surveys, someone who's great at coding. By virtue of the project team assignments, you understand who is available to give you certain lessons learned, who is available to give you the knowledge to create the knowledge. You see what I'm saying? All right. Resource breakdown structure is the next one. And it says it includes information on the composition of the team and helps to understand which knowledge is available. See that? All this stuff is relevant. Next one here, the stakeholder register. If you are with me on page 101, it says the stakeholder register contains details about the identified stakeholders. Details about the identified stakeholders to help understand the knowledge they may have. You see where this is going? We're trying to understand the knowledge available so that we can create using these great minds, using these great knowledge sources, create knowledge and use existing knowledge, okay? Okay. The next input, we talked about this on the previous slide, deliverables. It says any unique and verifiable product, result, or capability to perform a service. It says deliverables are typically tangible components completed to meet the project objectives and can include components of the project management plan. So in some instances, these deliverables, be they components of the project management plan or some product, service, or result, can actually be a source to glean lessons learned. Okay, that's why they're relevant here. And as usual, EEF and its sidekick, OPA. Let's go over to the tools and techniques here. Tools and techniques, expert judgment. So it says expertise in knowledge management, information management, organizational learning, knowledge and information management tools, and relevant information from other projects. If it's expertise, it's expert judgment. And if it's in these sources, these areas, you definitely want to use it, especially the knowledge management and the information management. Now let's talk about knowledge management itself. This one right here, okay? Knowledge management, let's talk about that one. It says, and I'm on page 102, knowledge management tools and techniques connect people so they can work together to create new knowledge, share tacit knowledge. What is tacit knowledge? Knowledge that is hard to convey. You may understand the context of tacit knowledge, but when it comes to explaining it, it can be hard, because how do you explain riding a bike or driving a car and the feelings associated with it? Someone I knew in a previous class, a doctor, he said, Phil, I've got an example, like a spine tap. When I do a spine tap, I know when I've hit the right place to grab the marrow. I'm like, Doc, that's too much information. The class may be squeamish. You know, keep your tacit knowledge to yourself. All right, but that's knowledge management. It says, connect people so they can work together to create new knowledge, share tacit knowledge, and integrate the knowledge of diverse team members. How do you get that knowledge that the doctor described? You sit down and you have a deep, intimate conversation about the intricacies of spine tapping and how you know you've done it well or not. It's not something you can just write in a book. Sometimes it's facial expressions, it's gestures, it's tone of voice, and all sorts. So when we talk about tacit knowledge, that's the knowledge you want to convey face to face. When we talk about explicit knowledge, that is knowledge that you can easily codify with pictures and words. You got to know the difference between tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge. Okay, remember that. And then still under knowledge management, it talks about ways you can do this: networking, COPs, meetings, work shadowing and reverse shadowing, discussion forums such as focus groups, knowledge sharing events such as seminars and conferences, workshops, storytelling, creativity and ideas management techniques. We're on page 103. Knowledge fairs and cafes and training that involves interaction between learners. Great stuff. Knowledge management, a lot of people are not doing that. Next one here is information management. So information management, watch the difference here. It says information management tools and techniques are used to create information and connect people to information. Knowledge in the head, information in a repository. You see that? They are effective for sharing simple, unambiguous, codified, explicit knowledge. They include, but are not limited to, methods for codifying explicit knowledge. For example, producing lessons learned, entries for the lessons learned register. The lessons learned register library services, information gathering, for example, web searches and reading published articles, and project management information system. And the list could go on and on. It says, tools and techniques that connect people to information can be enhanced by adding an element of interaction. For example, include a contact me function so that users can get in touch with the originators of the lessons and ask for advice specific to their project and context. So when you're considering knowledge management and information management, you got to understand that knowledge management is very people to people driven. Information management is very people to information driven. You got to understand that the preferred method for tacit knowledge has got to be knowledge management. Real-time exchange, face-to-face exchange, so on and so forth. All right, let's turn the page over, my friends. And let's go to the last paragraph before interpersonal and team skills on page 104 at the top there, still under information management. The last paragraph is very important too. It says, knowledge and information management tools and techniques should be connected to the project processes and process owners. COPs, communities of practice and subject matter experts, for example, may generate insights that leads to improved control processes. Having an internal sponsor that can ensure improvements are implemented. It says lessons learned register entries may be analyzed to identify common issues that can be addressed by changes to project procedures. So in other words, you want to be all up in the business of understanding the knowledge, understanding the information, and making improvements that not only change and improve knowledge management or information sharing, but you also want to identify what could improve the project processes, what could improve the organizational processes. How do you find this out? This process, managed project knowledge. It's a powerful one. Okay, enough said. Take a look at these interpersonal and team skills. So active listening all the way on down. Let's take those, page 104. Active listening helps reduce misunderstandings. What do you do to actively listen? Keep quiet and listen. Stop anticipating what to say. Use nonverbal cues like nodding and try to repeat back what the person said. Don't answer hastily. Don't make judgments. And also try to put the people in the center of the discussion when you talk. That's active listening. Next one, facilitation. Facilitating the meeting of the minds. Leadership used to communicate the vision. So great leaders are able to communicate vision, right? Communicating the vision to the team. Networking, informal connections, and in some cases, formal connections among people, among those stakeholders. It creates conditions to share tacit and explicit knowledge and political awareness. Helps the project manager to plan communications based on the environment. The project manager doesn't want to overstep her boundaries or his boundaries. All right. And that pretty much is all that we have for these interpersonal and team skills. Next, let's talk about the lessons learned register again. Now, there's not much meat in this, but on page 104, you see it there. And the key things I want to point out are more in the last two paragraphs. So it says a lessons learned register can include the category and description of the situation. Then it says the lessons learned register is created as an output of this process early in the project. Thereafter, it is used as an input and updated as an output in many processes throughout the project. In other words, once it's created, you're going to see it again as an input. It's going to be updated in many other processes. It says at the end of a project or phase, The information is transferred to an organizational process asset called a lessons learned repository. Write that down. LLR, lessons learned repository, or LLREP. So you don't confuse this with the LLREG, the lessons learned register. You see, lessons learned registers from various projects become part of a lessons learned repository at a higher level, combining lessons learned from many projects, and then ultimately that becomes part of the OPAs. That's what they're talking about. So think about it. Lessons learned registers all go into the lessons learned repository, and that becomes part of your OPAs. Very important to remember. As usual, we have the project management plan updates and the organizational process assets updates. It goes without saying, you're going to get your lessons learned register. It's going to be updated, remember, okay? You're going to have it coming back in here. But ultimately, if you realize there are better ways of doing things on your project in this area, this is what is going to be updated. Look, it says, all projects create new knowledge. Some of this knowledge is codified, embedded in deliverables, or embedded in improvements to processes and procedures. Existing knowledge can also be codified or embedded for the first time as a result of this process. Watch this. If an existing idea for a new procedure, is piloted in the project and found to be successful, what is it? It will eventually become an OPA. If a process is found to be good by virtue of the lessons learned process, the managed project knowledge process, you find this to be a better way of doing things, whatever that thing is, you need to update your OPAs. For example, if you find a better way of doing quality control, you find a better way of inspecting a widget, inspecting a deliverable, you realize, oh, we can do this better. You need to document that. It needs to become your organizational process asset update, because you want people to follow that new way that you found to get better results like you did. So don't confuse lessons learned register with your OPA updates. Here, the updates are not your lessons learned. Here, the updates are the newfound ways of doing things that you need to update in a process document, a standard operating procedural document somewhere. I hope that makes sense to you. Question time. Questions below, my friends. Let's go. Questions, questions, questions. All right, let's move on. Let's go to our next process called MCPW. So go to page 71, follow along. Let's see what exactly this is all about. Okay, here we go. Page 71. Are you with me? We're taking a look at monitor and control project work. Well, look what we have here, a beaten up PMBOK guide. It's time to move on to our next process, which is called Monitor and Control Project Work. So follow me to page 71. You can take a look at the high-level information. And if you're looking at 4.5, what do you see? Stuff that you already know. So let's take a look. Project management plan and project document, you know these from page 89. We need this for what we are doing here. What are we doing here? It says, the mission is to monitor and control work across the project, the entire project. So if you're monitoring and controlling work across the entire project, you need a plan. And that's why you've got the project management plan. You also need to be referring to relevant project documents. Now you'll realize there are two documents here that are very unique to this process. When we crack this open, you'll find out what those are. Now we have a very important appearance of WPI, Work Performance Information. Work performance information comes from all of the processes outside of integration that are within the monitoring and controlling process group. So all the way from scope down to stakeholder within monitoring and controlling, they all give you WPI. That is very important. This is a recurring theme in the PMBOK guide, work performance information. Work performance information is your analyzed work performance data. So you're getting your work performance data and it's been analyzed, put into context so that you can make sensible conclusions from it for decision making. It has become WPI at that stage. So after you have analyzed your work performance data that is also going into all those processes, you get work performance information. Remember the discussions we've had? I hope you do. All right. Then we have agreements. These agreements could be agreements regarding how the project is going to be monitored and controlled. KPIs and things such as that could live in these agreements. So let's keep our eye on that one. We're going to come back to it. EEFs and OPAs need no introduction. Only great individuals inspire resources every day. My senator legalized cranberry and granola for patients. Remember those two. And processes and procedures. And the corporate knowledge base or the organizational knowledge repository. All right. So still on page 71, if you take a look at the tools and techniques here, there are things that you already know. So expert judgment, expertise regarding this field of monitoring and controlling and the project as a whole. Data analysis, we're going to take a look at the specific analysis we're talking about. But remember, data analysis is pretty much analyzing data so that you can draw sensible conclusions. But in this case, you're analyzing data that may have come in other forms so that you understand what to put into your output. Now, I'm going to show you the output right here because the output is tied to this data analysis. So when you think about the analysis you're doing, it's really for this right here, your work performance reports, okay? Your work performance reports need you to do some analysis of sorts to understand what to put into the report and to compile it in a sensible fashion. Hold on to that thought. Okay, next thing here is decision making. We're going to crack that open and take a closer look at it. But when you hear decision making, it could be a variety of things. It could be making a decision about what to do, or it could be other things, as we'll find out. Hold on to that thought. And then we also have meetings. So we're talking about the meeting of the minds as we are monitoring and controlling the project work. All right. Now, the output that you see here, the WPR, the work performance report, that is a compilation of various pieces of WPI, work performance information put into context and documented into a report that cuts out the unnecessary pieces of information, focuses on what is needed for each specific audience set. This is really what this is, okay? So your work performance report contains work performance information contextualized, put into context. All right, we have change requests, CAPADRU, remember that? And we have project management plan updates and project documents updates. These are not new to us. And that's pretty much it for the high level. Now we need to go into the detail. So remember, hold your questions till we get to the end, and then you can ask your questions. But for now, why don't you jump on ahead to where we're going? I know you know where we're going. We're going to, bing, the monitor and control project work detail. So the detail for this, follow me forward to 4.5 on page 105. Okay, so as we take a look, we can see this project management plan, any component of the project management plan talked about on page 89. That's what we're thinking about here. Okay. Project documents, we can see we have assumption log, basis of estimates, lots of things. I'm going to go through these really quick with you to hit why they are here. So the assumption log contains constraints and assumptions, and these need to be watched at this point as we are monitoring and controlling the project. It makes sense, right, to keep an eye on your constraints and assumptions, okay? Those may affect the project. We need to keep an eye on them. BOEs, this refers to the basis of estimates, and this indicates how estimates were derived. It helps us understand the context of the project report and the information we're getting back. Cost forecast, this is one of the special ones I told you about, and so is that one hiding right here. Schedule forecasts and cost forecasts. You see those? Those two are rather unique. You don't find these as inputs to anywhere else but here, okay? So your cost forecasts come from the control cost process. This says, based on the project's past performance, the cost forecasts are used to determine if the project is within defined tolerance ranges. So this is going to help you know the future state of the project cost-wise. The issue log is a log of issues. We've taken a look at that, and it's used to document and monitor who is responsible for resolving issues. As you're monitoring and controlling the project, you need to keep an eye on this issue log. Okay, lessons learned register. We've talked about that. So it says the lessons learned register, page 108, may have information on effective responses for variances and corrective and preventive actions. Milestone list is just a list of milestones. It helps you know what's done, what's coming up, is it done, is it not done? It helps you keep an eye on that. Quality reports, it says the quality report, this one right here, quality reports, it says includes quality management issues, recommendations for process, project, and product improvements, corrective action recommendations, and this could include rework, defect or bugs repair, so on and so forth. And then we have the risk register, a register of all the risks on the project, the risk report, which shows information on the overall project risks and information on individual risks, and schedule forecasts, which help you predict the future of the project from a schedule perspective. So my friends, you see there's a lot of stuff here, lots of stuff, but this stuff is good. It's to help you effectively monitor and control the project. All right. The next one here is WPI. Now remember I told you WPI, it comes from all of the processes outside of integration within monitoring and controlling. It's this information that will eventually become what you see over there, the work performance reports. You see, your work performance reports consist of WPI. All right, agreements, it says here on page 109, It says a procurement agreement includes terms and conditions and may incorporate other items the buyer specifies regarding what the seller is to perform or provide. So you need to keep your eye on this agreement so that as you are reporting, you're tracking what you're meant to be doing and reporting on that. Very important. It says if the project is outsourcing part of the work, the project manager needs to oversee the contractor's work. So we're talking about agreements not just between you and the buyer. If you are the performing organization, this could also be agreements between you and a seller working for you as part of your subcontractors. Okay. I've talked about EEFs and OPAs so many times. Focus on those in your private reading. Now, regarding these, expert judgment, we know what that is. Data analysis, it says here on page 111. Alternatives analysis. Alternatives need to be considered to understand the corrective action to take, if any, or what to do, preventive actions, if any. If there's a deviation and you're monitoring and controlling project work, you need to consider alternatives. Then we have cost-benefit analysis. This is also a continuation of your alternatives, taking a look at the alternatives and saying which of these is the best alternative to pick. That's what you're doing. So it says cost-benefit analysis helps to determine the best corrective action in terms of cost in case of project deviations. You see what I'm saying? It's all about your options. Then we have earned value analysis. This is coming up big time in chapter 7. So in chapter 7, we're going to be going deeper on this stuff. But it says here, earned value provides an integrated perspective on scope, schedule, and cost performance. So earned value is a way of you taking a look at the triple constraint numerically and understanding where you are in terms of performance of schedule, cost, and scope. It's time boxed though. So earned value is definitely rooted around time periods. You can see your performance in scope over time, your performance in cost over time. You could see it over 1 month, see it over the entire project, see it over a quarter, and so on. You're going to be seeing that in chapter 7. Root cause analysis. So root cause analysis is another useful one here as we are monitoring and controlling project work. It says it focuses on identifying the main reasons of a problem. It makes sense. If you're having problems or there are things you need to adjust, you need to know why that is happening. All right, next one here, trend analysis. You're just looking for trends of performance over time on the project. You could be looking at trends of cost, performance, schedule performance, scope performance, or any of those. So what this trend analysis is doing is warning the project manager ahead of time that there could be problems later. All right, variance analysis. It says variance analysis reviews the differences or variances between planned and actual performance. So that's variance analysis. You're going to look at what you planned, what you got. Why did we get this when we planned this? You're going to really have to ask the question, what is the variance? And then you could use root cause analysis to analyze that. All right. Now we are onto decision making. So in this instance, decision making, it says on page 111, a decision making technique that can be used includes, but is not limited to, voting. So this is talking about voting to decide upon maybe a course of action or a perceived understanding of something. And last but not least, we have meetings. Now let's take a look at the outputs. Follow me to page 112. I've talked about this so many times, work performance reports. So these are reports that aggregate work performance information as necessary and circulates it to stakeholders. Says work performance reports could include status reports and progress reports. Work performance reports can contain earned value graphs and information, trend lines and forecasts, heat reports, stoplights. All sorts of reports can be in this WPI. It's a catch-all. All right, next we have change requests, CAPADR. Don't forget the U, even though it's not listed on page 112. Okay, and then we go into our usual ones, the regular suspects, project management plan updates, and project documents updates. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now you need to share any questions. Have you got questions on this? Or does it make sense? Let me know. Questions about this process. Chat them in right now. Chat them in, chat them in, chat them in. Questions, concerns. If you don't understand one of these and you need a little bit more tweaks, you gotta let me know. You see, we're covering everything. Nothing is escaping. That's how we need to do it. I don't want you to go away with questions. Ask them. Ask them now. So, we're moving on to our next process. And as usual, you need to be looking at page 71, and you'll see the high level of this process. This process is called Perform Integrated Change Control. Now, what we're doing in this process, as you can see up there, it says the CCB, that's the Change Control Board or approver, approves or rejects change requests. Outcomes of change reviews are documented in the change log. So there could be a change control board, a body of people reviewing the change request, or maybe it's just the project manager and the project sponsor, or maybe in some instances, it could be the project manager in isolation. There are many different possibilities. Now, it is important that I show you this because I want you focusing on the right stuff. So page 115, the second line, it says, it is the ultimate responsibility of the project manager. This process is. Go to line 3, the end of line 3. It says changes may be requested by any stakeholder involved with the project. Any means any. And it says, and may occur at any time throughout the project lifecycle. Then if you go to the next paragraph, it says, before the baselines are established, changes are not required to be formally controlled. So until management has approved all the baselines, stamped them, you can modify stuff because it's not yet etched in stone. It is not yet formally approved. See what they're saying? And that's why you don't find a lot of change requests coming from the planning process group, because you're still planning. So it's not really considered a change request. Make sense? And then it says, on the fourth line of the second paragraph, it says, let's read from the third line. It says, as a general rule, each project's configuration management plan should define which project artifacts need to be placed under configuration control. What are they talking about? They're talking about the updates of any product features and functions, because these need to be documented and versioned. So in instances where you may use version control, you need to agree on which documents are going to be version controlled tightly. That's what we're referring to here as the configuration management, the changes to features and functions and the tracking of those and the modifications to any artifacts like drawings. That's configuration management, all right? Now, this one in the third paragraph on page 115, I want you to highlight it. Although changes may be initiated verbally, they should be recorded in written form and entered into the change management and or configuration management system. See that? That is important information to consider. Even if someone gives you a verbal change request, you want to say, hey, can you fill in a change request form? Then you want to document that stuff. That's what they're talking about. It's important. Okay. And then on the fifth line, the word always there is important. It says, whenever a change request may impact any of the project baselines, this is from line 4, a formal integrated change control process is always required. Do you get what I'm saying? Is it making sense? I hope it's making sense. Give me some assurance that it's making sense to you, because page 115 is loaded. We ain't even started talking about the ITTOs. So let's talk about the ITTOs that are on page 71 for this process. As you realize, this is one of my favorites. So project management plan, we know what that is, needs no introduction. Project documents, these are on page 89, need no introduction. We just took a look at work performance reports. Now, why do we have them here? Because as you are reviewing change requests, you need to look at your current performance many times to find out, does it make sense changing this? Because we are behind or because something else is at risk. You need to be looking at these reports to understand in the context of the current performance, should we go ahead and approve a change request? For example, someone is asking for you to do additional scope. You look at your work performance report, you're already behind schedule. You add that scope, whether they're paying you or not, you're going to run into schedule problems. Or perhaps it opens your eyes to see other possibilities or other things that are needed to carry out that change request. Remember, we've taken a look at these change requests as well. They are CAPADRU, C-A-P-A-D-R-U, corrective action, preventive action, defect repair, and updates. Don't forget. EEFs and OPAs, we're beating these ones to death. Let's leave them alone. Let's go up to expert judgment, expertise and understanding surrounding that change request over there, okay? If you've got an expert judgment to help in reviewing that, it is going to facilitate this process somewhat, okay? Change control tools is a term, a catch-all for any manual or automated tools used for change control. For example, if you have a spreadsheet that contain these change requests, you keep them on a shared drive and you say, okay, everyone, the change requests we got are up there on the shared drive. Log in and put your signature next to it, whether you agree or not. That becomes a change control tool. But there's some other more lofty tools, some other more expensive tools, some other fancier tools. For example, in a previous company, part of my job was implementation of a change management tool known as ChangePoint. CompuWare made that, and we used it to move IT service requests around. That's an example of a change control tool. Many of them do exist. It's like a virtual roundtable where you're passing the request through a series of steps, going from functional head to functional head, or change control board member to change control board member. That's really what it all is. So that, keep that in mind. Again, we've got data analysis, and I'm going to be showing you what these analyses are when we break it down. Decision making, again, making a decision. Should we approve it? Should we not? Should we reject it? Should we not? Should we put it on hold? That's one thing you need to realize in this process. You could do a rejection, you could put it on hold or pending status, or you could accept it. Or you might even push back and say, hey, we want to negotiate this change request. We can't give you X, but we can give you Y. So a lot of possibilities could happen here. And that's to be considered, you know. Meetings, the meetings, change control meetings, change management meetings, whatever you want to call them, meetings of the change control board to decide upon the outcome. Okay. Now, over here, we have approved change requests, and this refers to an outcome of approval. You're approving the change request and saying, yeah, we'll go ahead, we'll do it. Project management plan updates and project documents updates, of course, they need no introduction, okay? And of course, you know the process of discussion is really performing integrated change control. So when you see me in front of the process, always have it in the back of your mind. That's what we're talking about, just to make sure you are not forgetting what we're doing here. All right. So that's pretty much it for the high level. Okay, let's go into the detail. And for the detail, you want to follow me to page 113. We're going to whiz through these very quickly because as we've been doing this, I'm guessing you're getting better and better, right? All right, here we go. Perform integrated change control details. All right, so right off the bat, the project management plan contains these two, talked about on page 89, your change management plan, how changes will be managed on the project as far as the baselines and documents. And then we go into configuration management, which talks about how those configurable items, the features, the functions, and any control documents are going to be versioned. The scope baseline, we know what that is, right? It's a baseline against which you manage scope. Now you're going to come across this in chapter 5, but this right here contains your WBS dictionary, and your project scope statement. The schedule baseline, again, this is the baseline against which the schedule is going to be measured. The cost baseline is the baseline against which cost will be measured. Now you may ask the question, why do we have these as inputs? Follow me really quick to page 116. And I'm going to read the high level of each one of those items. All right, so let's start off with this. Change management plan. It says it provides the direction for managing the change control process and documents, and it documents the roles and responsibilities of the change control board. Okay, configuration management plan, it says describes the configurable items of the project and identifies those that will be recorded and updated so that the product of the project remains consistent and operable. So I said features and functions of the product. That's really what you're keeping up to date. The scope baseline, we've talked about that. Schedule baseline, pretty much straightforward, and the cost baseline. So these are going to be used to measure the impact or assess the impact, you know, impact to scope, impact to schedule, impact to cost. For what? For those change requests. Every change request needs to be assessed against those triple constraint items: schedule, cost, and scope. Don't forget that. All right, next one here is project documents. Basis of estimates. This indicates how the cost, duration, and resource estimates were derived, and that can be used to calculate the impact of a change on the project. The requirements traceability matrix, this is used to track requirements to their origin, and it helps also to assess the impact of changes to the products, the project scope, product scope, whatever it is. Because if those are requirements that affect the product, of course, you need to keep those under watch. Now, this refers more to project scope because product scope begets project scope. If you want additional scope in the product, it will add or may add, under most circumstances, additional scope to the project. What is product scope? Features and functions in the product. What is project scope? The work that must be done to achieve the product scope, or requirements, if you will. So we got to be remembering all these terms when we look at this. Risk report, it says, the risk report presents information on sources of overall and individual project risks involved by the change requested. So individual project risks involved by the change requested. So if you're asking for a particular change, the risk report may provide information to help you understand the individual project risks that may impact that change request or maybe surrounding that change request. We've talked about the WPR already, work performance reports, okay? It says WPRs of particular interest to this process include resource availability. Do we have the resources? Do we have the cost? Do we have the right amount of resources and things like that? Burn down charts and burn down charts, burn up charts, and earned value reports. Those help you understand if it makes sense to carry out that change request. Going to our next one. This could be CAPADRU. And it says here on page 117, change requests that have an impact on the project baselines should normally include information about the cost of implementing the change. So there's a very intricate map of how change requests should be considered. Hold on to that thought. We're going to have to talk about that. All right. Then it says, change requests that have an impact on the project baseline should normally include information about cost, information about schedule, information about resources, and risks. These changes should be approved by the Change Control Board if it exists, and by the customer or sponsor unless they are part of the CCB. So if your customer and sponsor are not part of the CCB, it makes sense to include them in these discussions. All right, good. Then we have our lousy sidekicks, EEFs and OPAs. We've talked about those sufficiently. Make sure you read those in detail as you comb through the PMBOK guide yourself. We've got expert judgment, okay? Expertise, understanding about the project, technical knowledge, understanding legislation and regulations, understanding legal aspects, understanding configuration management, risk management, and anything else that is pertinent to this area. Then we've got change control tools. I gave you an elaborate breakdown. It is what it is, okay? It says in order to facilitate configuration and change management, manual or automated tools may be used. Just remember my example. This section, though, is important in understanding the terms. These terms, it says, tool selection for change control tools, second paragraph here on page 118, under change control tools, it says, tool selection should be based on the needs of the project stakeholders, including organizational and environmental considerations. And then it says you should do the following as part of your configuration management activities. Highlight this. You got a highlighter? I hope you've been highlighting all the stuff I've been telling you. Hopefully. All right. It says identify configuration item, record and report configuration item status, perform configuration item verification and audit. And then it goes on to page 119 and says tools should support the following change management activities as well. So you got those three. The tools should support configuration management, and the tools should support change management. And the change management activities are identify changes, document the changes, decide on the changes, track the changes. In other words, this tool could serve as a kind of log. So when you see the output here that we have as change log, bear in mind that your change log many an instance actually exists as part of this system, this change control tool that we're talking about. And remember my example of change point. Now let's go back to page 118, a few important things. So steps in configuration management that this tool should do. 1, identify the items that are configurable, okay? These should have been predefined, okay? It says identification and selection of a configuration item to provide the basis for which the product configuration is defined and verified. products and documents are labeled, changes are managed, and accountability is maintained. Then it says, record and report configuration item status. So you want to update this database, if you will, of configurable items. Report on each item as needed, and then perform configuration item verification and audit. What does this mean? It says configuration verification and configuration audits ensure that the composition of a project's configuration items is correct and that corresponding changes are registered. What does all this mean? This is a deliverable that our project is meant to satisfy. What are we going to do in configuration management? We're going to take note if the dimensions have changed. We're going to record that. If the actual software on the system is changing, we're going to record that. If the interface is changing, we're going to record that and what version of the interface it is. All of these could be looked at as documented in a spec document. Updates to specs. Specs. You got to remember it's specs. And then parts of configuration items could also be things like your WBS. Some companies say we want to make this configurable, want to know what version it is, so we're going to tightly control the version keeping of the WBS and the elements that are added and so on. So we can take this to the nth degree, but to make it simple for yourself, you just got to remember, oh yeah, we're going to make this stuff configurable. All right, if it's there and it says this should be configurable, you got to be tracking it using a configuration management approach. Any item that is mentioned as a configurable item needs to be controlled, needs to be version controlled, and the specs need to be versioned. Okay, it's as simple as that. Now the next page talks about these documents, which are not spec documents, but they're project documents, or they might be project management plan elements that need to be controlled through formal change control. Okay. Going to the next one here, data analysis. Data analysis, we got two types of analysis here, alternatives analysis, looking for alternatives for the requested changes. It says, this technique is used to assess the requested changes and decide which are accepted, rejected, or need to be modified. Then we've got cost-benefit analysis. This analysis helps determine if the requested change is worth its associated cost. And then we've got these, voting. So you could vote in the change control board using unanimity. Unanimity means everyone must agree. Majority means the largest, or no, I beg your pardon, majority means at least over 50 must decide, greater than 50%. We call that majority. Okay, if it's less than 50%, but it's the biggest block in the group, we call it plurality. Okay, so if there are factions, let's say 30, 30, 40, the 40% that say, we agree on this, we want to do this, the 40% win the vote. We call that plurality. But for it to be majority, it must be greater than 50%. Does that make sense? Plurality, the largest block, majority over 50% decide. And they decide whether to accept, defer, or reject the change request. The next one here is autocratic decision making. What does this mean? It means one person makes the decision whether to approve or reject. It could be the major customer, maybe the CEO of the customer company says, we're gonna go ahead and do this. Maybe they have more power in the change control board. It really depends, you see. But one person decides. Multi-criteria decision analysis uses a decision matrix to evaluate the change request. So you could look at the change request in terms of value, ease of carrying out the change request, stakeholder engagement that may result, and you could score these different variables and decide, okay, we're going to do this change request, this one we're not going to do, so on and so forth. Okay, Meetings, meeting of the minds, we already know what that is. The outputs, no brainer. Approved change request is a change request that has been approved. Project management plan updates, we're talking about any component, and project documents updates. Specifically, we have a new term here. I would have made this a major output. It's the change log. The change log. So you see, my friends, when it comes to studying the PMBOK guide, you gotta do it like this. And you gotta be taking notes. And you gotta be opening up your book. And if you're not doing all those things, as I'm saying all this, you're missing out. So you wanna be going along with me, highlighting major things, taking copious notes. Okay, let's maximize our time. Now, do you have questions? You got questions? Put them in the chat box right now. Let's do that. Questions, concerns. Come on now. All right. Let's move on to the final process in integration. It's called close, project, or phase. CPOP. So what exactly are we doing in close project or phase? It says transitioning the deliverable to the customer and carrying out a final lessons learned for a phase or the project as a whole. So you could be closing out a project or a phase in this process. Okay, that's why it's called closed project or phase. So on the exam, if you're asked questions about closing out a phase, you know they're talking about this process, close, project, or phase. Now at a high level, all this stuff looks very familiar now. We've got the project charter coming in here because it contains the success criteria for the project. We have the project management plan that guides us on how to close this out. We got project documents. Project documents are talked about on page 89. We'll crack this open and see which ones. Accepted deliverables are deliverables that have been accepted formally by the customer or the sponsor. These become an input to closing out the project for obvious reasons because we're going to transition this. Now watch here. Accepted deliverables, final product, service, or result transition. You see what I'm saying? This accepted deliverable needs to be transitioned to the customer formally. For example, one of our clients builds ships. They get done with the ship, maybe it's for the Coast Guard. There is a final transition of that ship. There's a ribbon cutting, there's a big old show, and it's formally transitioned to the operations team at the Coast Guard, for example. So whenever you see final product, service, or result transition, just remember it is this accepted deliverable that you are transitioning, okay? Business documents. So we're going back to our business documents for some valid reasons. And part of these reasons we're going to talk about, but at a high level, remember the business case and the benefits management plan talked about way back. these become relevant in closing the project or phase. Why? Because the business case, it will tell you if at the end of the day, you got to the justification you were seeking, you see. And then the benefits management plan is going to outline those benefits you're targeting. So by the time you get to the end of the project, you know, have we gotten there or are we yet to get there in the future? So the expected outcomes and so on, those are documented as part of this. Keep your eye on that. Agreements. It makes sense at the end of a project to take a look at those agreements, contracts, and say, have those been met? Have we crossed all those T's, dotted those I's? Have we done everything we said we would? And at the same time, has everything that we asked for from our contractors or subcontractors being done? So there are many different perspectives to think about these agreements. Okay. Procurement documentation, as it should read. So let us magically change. There we go. So procurement documentation, as you can see, it says on page 125, to close the contract, all procurement documentation is collected, indexed, and filed. So when you take a look at procurement documentation, they're really talking about any form of procurement documentation. See, be it statement of work, RFP, RFQ, RFI, whatever the procurement documentation is, all of that stuff, it says to close the contract, all of this documentation is collected, indexed, and filed. It could be records of the ongoing procurement as it's continuing and things such as that. But we could get into a lot of detail regarding procurement documentation. If you go to 12.3.1.4, this talks about the specific procurement documentation. So I'm going to go there really quick, and I'm just going to read it out to you. 12.3.1.4. It says here, procurement documentation contains complete supporting records for the administration. It says procurement documentation includes a statement of work, payment information, contractor work performance information, plans, drawings, and other correspondence, whatever that is. That's a big old bucket for anything we label as procurement documentation. Probably not the RFPs and RFQs in this instance, but centered more on the statement of work and the operating information for the procurement. All right, so that one's a new one. You really haven't seen that term, procurement documentation. And we've got OPAs, organizational process assets. And it says here on page 126, the OPAs that can influence the closed project or phase process include guidelines for closing out a phase or project, and the configuration management knowledge base containing the versions and baselines of all official organizational standards, policies, procedures, and any project documents. In other words, anything you need to guide you on closing the project, that's it. All right. So that's pretty much it for the inputs. Let's talk about the tools and techniques. Expert judgment, this refers to management control expertise, audit expertise, legal and procurement, and legislation and regulations. The next thing here, data analysis, has some pretty important stuff that we're going to talk about more in the details. But just remember, it's an analysis of documents. It's an analysis as to whether you really got to your goal. It's an analysis of trends and variances. So hold on to that thought. And then we've got meetings. It says meetings are used to confirm that the deliverables have been accepted, to validate that the exit criteria have been met. Okay, now we can move on to these pieces. updates to any project documents. So we update the documents and we mark them as final. We talked about the final transition of the deliverable to the customer. The final report, the outcome, did you get to the goal or not? And organizational process assets updates, okay? So that is the high level. It contains some sneaky little bits and pieces that we need to know. So keep your eye on those. Let's go into the very tiny little pieces that are left here. All right, so taking a look at this, and I'm not going to dwell on this because we've really gone through these inputs quite a number of times. So follow me to page 121. There's a laundry list of inputs. I am not going to dwell on these, but all of these are important to cement and solidify closure so that you truly know you're done. So think about this stage as though you are checking off on each of these documents and making sure that you crossed your T's, you did all you said you would, you dotted your I's, and everyone in the world of the project is happy. So on your own, I would like you to read page 124 with all of these things we've talked about to some degree. This is where we're going through demonstrating compliance and demonstrating finalization. Now, there is one I want to call out because it is very important, and you'll see mention of it here and mention of it there, OPA updates. What am I talking about? This particular one. Let's read. The lessons learned in the phase or project will be finalized. You see, you're trying to finalize all these things, but this one definitely needs to be finalized. So it comes in here. You're going to finalize it before entering the lessons learned register into the lessons learned repository. Where is the lessons learned repository? It is right here as an OPA update. This is talked about on page 128. So if you go to page 128 with me, the very last thing mentioned in integration is under OPA updates, and it's the lessons learned repository. Okay? Got to keep that in mind. So on your own, cover all the others. They're very straightforward. You know, all of these assumption log, basis of estimates, all of these, you know what they're tied to? They're all tied in some way to this document analysis. You're going to do a document analysis of all of this stuff. Okay? Document analysis of all of these documents. Makes sense, doesn't it? See, if you go to page 126 with me, and let's focus on this so that you can understand all this. It says document analysis, assessing available documentation, will allow identifying lessons learned and knowledge sharing for future projects and OPA improvement. So it's twofold. These documents, not only are you trying to finalize them, you could also glean some helpful lessons learned as you do your document analysis. Keep that in mind. All right. Here we have accepted deliverables, and these are deliverables that have been accepted by the customer. They come in here so we can transition them to the customer finally. Okay, what else do we have? Business documents, we've talked about this. The business case and the benefits management plan. If you go to page 125, it says, the business case documents the business need and the cost benefit analysis that justify the project. So at the end of the day, looking at the business case, can you justify the project or not? And then we have the benefits management plan that is going to help you see if you met the benefits or if they are still to come. You see, did you achieve the benefits or did you not? Agreements, also another important one. These agreements are going to help you deduce if you met your part of the bargain or if the contractors working for you met their part of the bargain. Okay? And last but not least, in this list of inputs, we have OPAs and, of course, procurement documentation that we've talked about. Okay? So procurement documentation, remember your statement of work, remember operating documentation for those vendors working for you, those contractors working for you, and the OPAs, okay, that will guide you in this process. Now, these are the analyses I mentioned earlier. Let's take a look as to why they are so important. So, follow me to page 126. Document analysis, we've talked about this. We're going to analyze documents not only to glean lessons learned, but to close out all of those documents. Then we've got regression analysis. It's a rather important one. Regression analysis, it says, analyzes the interrelationships between different project variables that contributed to the success of the project. In other words, you want to find out what actually contributed largely to success or the outcome of the project, whatever that may be. Trend analysis is the next one. Trend analysis, this is looking for trends, and it could be trends in terms of cost, in terms of schedule, whatever the outcome eventually was. You could look at the trend over time from the beginning to the end. Variance analysis looks at what you planned versus what you got. And it says here on page 126, variance analysis can be used to improve the metrics of the organization by comparing what was initially planned and the end result. And of course, we got meetings as usual. All right. I hope this stuff is all making sense. Every piece is important. Let's take a look at the outputs here. Major outputs. I've already talked about these: project documents updates, any documents that need to be updated. We've talked about the final product, service, or result transition, transitioning the deliverable to the client. It says on page 127, a product, service, or result once delivered by the project may be handed over to a different group or organization that will operate, maintain, and support it throughout its life cycle. Keep that in mind. All right, next one here is the final report. We've talked about this. It says the final report provides a summary of the project performance. It can include information such as summary level description of the project or phase, scope objectives, quality objectives, cost objectives, and summary of the validation information for the final product, service, or result. In other words, how do we know that this thing has been approved and that has been stamped as final? Okay? Summary of the validation information. So we're talking more about the validate scope and how you stamped approval on that thing. How do you know the customer has approved that thing and validated it? All right, next page, it says schedule objectives, including whether the results achieve the benefits that the project was undertaken to address. And it says they indicate the degree to which they were achieved. The same thing. Summary of how the final product, service, or result achieved the business needs and the degree to which those were achieved. And an estimate for when the business needs will be met in the future. So your final report could have a plethora of information in it. You can see there are 8 bullet points just about that. And it is important because that is one of the major outputs from any project. At the end, you want a final report on whether you got to the end successfully or not. Finally, we've got OPA updates, and the big thing here is the final bullet. It says lessons learned repository. Lessons learned and knowledge gained throughout the project are transferred to the lessons learned repository for use by future projects. So that concludes our final process of integration. Do you have questions? Drop them down below if you do. Questions. Questions, questions, questions. If there are no questions, well, we're pretty much done. That's it for integration. Now, if there are no questions, it's my turn to give you some questions. So let's take a look at what I've got for you.